It was common knowledge in their circle that Madeline Pinson and Xavier Kenward had been childhood sweethearts and were made for each other. Point one was a top-tier tech expert, the other a business management prodigy. It was a formidable union, but right now, her body was buried in the frigid dirt on the outskirts of town, only her head exposed above ground. The smell of fresh soil mixed with rotting grass roots weighed down on her chest. Every breath sent a sharp pain tearing through her lungs. Ahead, the blinding headlights of a car tore through the night. Xavier sat in the driver's seat, the engine growling low. His face looked cold in the backlight. "You're crazy." "Xavier, what are you doing?" Madeline's voice warped with fear and suffocation. "Now you're scared." He rolled down the window, his voice eerily calm. "Did it even cross your mind what would happen when you cut Ella out of the patent application?" She was totally devastated over this and almost got run over by a car. With that, he slammed on the gas pedal. The tires crushed gravel as the car shot forward, aiming directly for her immobilized head. A screeching brake sounded at the last second. But the inertia still sent the front bumper slamming hard into her forehead with a bang. A searing pain erupted. Warm blood gushed from her nostrils and temples in an instant, blurring her vision. The earthy stench of dirt mixed with the metallic tang of blood. Xavier stepped out, his polished leather shoes coming to a halt right before her eyes. He crouched down and patted her bleeding cheek with his cold phone. "Call the judging committee," he uttered mercilessly. "Tell them you got a sudden emergency and you're voluntarily giving the award to Daniela." Madeline's breath hitched. For 5 years, more than 1,800 days and nights, she'd poured her soul into this, for the recognition, the honor, to build the company up to its current size. But Daniela Leonard was merely a fragile imposter, constantly playing the victim to garner sympathy. She was showered with his affection simply because she resembled his long-dead sister. How could he do this? Xavier seemed to read her resentment. A cruel smirk tugged at his lips. "Because your little brother's hanging over a vat of molten wax right now." He swiped open his phone screen. A live surveillance feed appeared. An abandoned wax museum. A rusted crane hoist held a thin-limbed young man suspended in midair. Below, a vat of bubbling wax churned, its rising heat distorting the image. "Maddie." 19-year-old Ryan Pinson screamed, his voice raw with terror. "Xavier. That's Ryan. He's the boy you swore you'd treat like your own brother before my mom's grave." Madeline's eyes were bloodshot as she thrashed around wildly, but the dirt just trapped her even tighter. "So, be a good girl." He pressed the phone to her blood-stained ear, his tone soft but unyielding. "Make the call." The judging committee chair's concerned voice came through the line. "Ms. Pinson? Is everything all right?" Madeline closed her eyes and swallowed the metallic taste in her mouth. Every word she spoke was laced with agony. "I'm giving up the award. It goes to Daniela Leonard." The second the call ended, the coldness on Xavier's face melted away, replaced by a flicker of genuine satisfaction. He even reached out, like he used to do, to wipe the blood from her temple. "Honey, don't go blaming me for being cruel. Ella is my only sister now. She needs this award to establish herself. As her sister-in-law and senior, it's only right that you step aside for her." Madeline stared daggers at him, at the man who had shared moldy orphanage bread with her, who had scaled walls to get her medicine when she burned with fever, who had vowed at their wedding, "Madeline and Ryan are my only family." Now, for another woman, he'd slipped sleeping pills into her milk to knock her out, buried her alive, and hung her little brother over a boiling vat of wax. Let him go. Her voice was hoarse. "I did as you said. After she gets the award, I will." Xavier glanced at his watch. "Ella's waiting for me at the venue. I gotta." His words were cut short. The surveillance feed on his phone shuddered violently. The control panel in the wax museum, Daniela, in a floral dress, accidentally bumped against a lever. The cable whirred, plunging downward. "No." Madeline's scream tore through the air, overlapping with Ryland's split-second shriek. The scalding hot vat swallowed Rylan, who had just received his music conservatory acceptance letter. The last frame froze on his hand reaching toward the camera, his fingertips solidifying, twisting, and freezing in the wax. Everything went dead silent. What happened? Xavier barked into the phone. Daniela's tearful, choked voice came through the line. Xavier, I didn't mean to. The button was so sensitive. She coughed before finishing speaking. Ella, what's wrong? Don't be scared. Xavier grabbed his jacket and bolted for the car. I'm coming right over. You look so pale. Are you in shock? Hang on. I'll take you to the hospital. Xavier, save him. Please save him. That's Ryan. Madeline thrashed around like a madwoman in the pit, screaming at the top of her lungs. Tears, blood, and mud caked her face. Xavier's hand paused on the car door handle for a split second. He turned to look at her bloodshot, desperate eyes, his brows furrowing in annoyance at the interruption. Madeline, have you had enough of this? The wax wasn't even that hot. I was just trying to scare you. Ella's shaken up now, and she's in poor health. I gotta go right now. He slammed the car door shut. The engine roared to life. The car sped away, its taillights shrinking into the darkness, taking the last glimmer of light from Madeline's world. The morgue was as cold as an icebox. Beneath the white sheet lay her brother, once so lively and bright, now nothing but a cold, lifeless form. As the cloth was finally drawn over his face, Madeline lost it, overwhelmed by heart-wrenching grief. She dropped to her knees beside the table and sobbed her heart out. The doctor's clinical, detached "my condolences" was the final weight. That broke her. She staggered to her feet, her nails dug deep into her own palms until skin split and blood welled. But she felt no physical pain. Only this could ease the guilt and despair that were about to tear her apart from the inside out. She sobbed until she drained the last bit of her strength. She pulled out her phone with trembling hands and dialed an international number. I can sell you the full set of core technologies and patents for the asteroid S9 intelligence system. Her voice was hoarse, yet it carried a deathly calm. I have only one condition. Make Xavier and Daniela pay for what they've done. The second she hung up, the phone screen lit up again. That familiar custom avatar stung her eyes under the morgue's pale, stark lights. Xavier's voice boomed through the speaker, his tone the usual unyielding command laced with lingering anger. Madeline, the awards ceremony isn't over yet. The press needs details on the project. You have to come help Ella. Get your ass over to the venue right now. As her husband, Xavier knew better than anyone how stubborn Madeline was down to her core. He had already sent 2 bodyguards to forcibly bring her to the awards venue. When they walked in, the stage spotlight was blazing down on Daniela. Clutching the trophy, Daniela commanded the attention of the entire hall, basking in waves of applause and adulation. Xavier, Madeline's husband of 8 years, the famously stoic CEO known throughout Houston's business world, stepped onto the stage at that moment, holding a bouquet like an awkward young boy. Impeccably dressed, his eyes were disturbingly bright as he meticulously smoothed Daniela's already flawless dress, his fingers lingering, his smile tender and intimate. That scene stung Madeline's eyes. In 8 years of marriage, she had never received such gentleness. Memories came flooding back. She used to mess up her hair clip on purpose when he woke up, then ask him to fix it with a hint of playful pleading. What she got in return was his impatient, frowning reproach. Madeline, you're a grown woman. Can you even handle a simple hair clip? At the thought of that cold, sharp tone, she felt her heart shatter as she watched how gently he treated Daniela. Suddenly, a reporter shot up from his seat in the audience, asking Ms. Leonard, "Our investigation shows that the core framework and primary code of the winning asteroid S9 intelligence system were created by another Astrum tech founder, Ms. Madeline Pinson. Have you plagiarized a colleague's work?" The room erupted in an uproar. Daniela's smile froze on her face instantly, all the color draining from her cheeks. She twisted her fingers together, looking like a poor, wronged thing. In that dead, awkward silence, Xavier snatched the microphone out of her hand. His gaze swept over the crowd, pinning Madeline with unerring accuracy. His eyes held no warmth, only an unmistakable warning. There is no plagiarism. His voice was clear, sharp, and final. Engineer Daniela single-handedly led and completed the entire process of the asteroid S9 intelligence system, from conceptual planning and framework design to core coding and final implementation. Ms. Pinson merely performed some basic, auxiliary tasks under our company's arrangement. Madeline trembled. She snapped her head up to look at him, desperate to catch even a flicker of a joke or reluctant complicity. But there was none. His eyes didn't linger on her for even a second before shifting to the wobbly Daniela beside him. His gaze softening with unapologetic protectiveness and reassurance. Madeline stumbled backward, slamming into the cold chair back, barely managing to stay on her feet. For 5 years, she'd slaved away, poured every bit of herself into this project, locking herself in the lab day after day. This system was her life's work, the achievement she thought they would guard together. Yet with just a few casual words, he had dismissed all her hard work and handed it over to someone else. Deafening applause erupted again. Madeline just stood there in the audience like a fool. During the follow-up interview session, the bodyguards invited her onto the stage, where she stood rigidly beside Daniela. The reporter's questions were sharp, but under Xavier's icy stare, she could only respond like a programmed robot. Her words mechanical. On her way back, the hallway was empty and silent. The sound of Xavier's footsteps approached. He then stopped directly in front of her. The coldness in his eyes seemed to melt a little, replaced by something more complicated. "Honey." He pulled her into an embrace, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "I heard what happened to Ryan. I'm sorry for your loss." That mention of her brother's name sent a tiny, almost imperceptible ripple across Madeline's cold heart. He cared about Ryan. However, his next words followed. "It was an accident. No one wanted this to happen." Xavier's tone was calm, almost placating. Ella had nothing to do with it. Rylan was terribly unlucky. "Xavier." Madeline shoved him away hard, her eyes bloodshot as she stared daggers at the face that was once so familiar yet now utterly alien. "That was my brother. You watched him grow up, too. He was tortured to death. Daniela's the killer. How can you still defend her?" Her fists were clenched so tight her knuckles cracked, every word laced with agony. "I'm calling the police. I want her to pay for this with her life. I want her go down with my brother." Xavier seemed to have anticipated this reaction. The tiny bit of warmth in his expression vanished in an instant, replaced by his usual cold, controlling self. "Madeline, don't be naive." He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a low, sharp purr that cut deeper than any blade. "Open your eyes. Who in all of Houston would dare take your case? Who would dare touch someone under my protection?" He paused and then delivered his cruel threat. "The dead are gone. But do you want your brother's body to rest in peace?" As if to prove his point, the phone in his pocket suddenly buzzed. The panicked voice of a hospital orderly came through the line. "Miss Pinson. A group of men came to the hospital and dragged Ryan's body away by force a moment ago." Madeline froze completely, a sharp ringing exploding in her ears. His words landed like a physical blow, devastating her cruelly. The searing pain drained every last bit of strength from her body. She doubled over, barely able to breathe. For the sake of letting Ryan rest in peace, she finally pushed down all the heart-wrenching grief and pain. She managed to force out a single word in a dry, hoarse voice. "Fine." Xavier curled his lips into a satisfied smirk. "You're in no state to arrange for a funeral. I'll let Ella handle it for you. Consider it her apology to Ryan." The day of Ryan's funeral, rain poured down in sheets. Very few came to see Ryan off, just a handful of old friends from the orphanage and 2 close colleagues, shivering in the bitter wind and cold rain. Everyone else had long steered clear of this trouble. During the tribute, the big screen meant to display a serene portrait of Ryan flickered suddenly. The footage that popped up made everyone gasp. The video showed Ryan's terrified face as he was forced to kneel and beg, and his desperate screams as he was hung from the tall crane, and final was the heart-stopping, blurred footage of him falling into a vat of scalding wax. "Turn it off." Madeline let out a wail, stumbling toward the control panel, desperate to spare her dead brother the last shred of dignity. Xavier felt a twinge in his chest watching her. He snapped at the staff. "What the hell's going on? How do you people do your jobs?" Daniela stepped forward. Her face was deathly pale, her body trembling violently. Tears welled in her eyes as she clutched Xavier's sleeve. "Xavi, I'm sorry. It was me. I brought the wrong flash drive. I didn't mean to." Xavier froze for a second. Looking at her pitiful, frightened state, he didn't scold her. Instead, his eyes filled with instant distress. He pulled Daniela tight into his arms, comforting her softly. "It's okay. It's not your fault. I know you didn't mean it." That faint, provocative smirk on Daniela's face was the final straw, shattering Madeline's sanity completely. Her eyes bloodshot, she clenched her fists and charged at Daniela. "You did this on purpose." Madeline barely touched her, but Daniela flew backward dramatically. Her head accidentally hit a hard stone on the ground, and blood gushed out at once. Madeline froze in her tracks. "Ella." Xavier screamed in agony, throwing himself down to hold the blood-soaked Daniela. When he looked up at Madeline, his eyes blazed with burning rage. "Madeline, must you make everyone miserable after your brother's dead? I guess I've been too lenient with you." He gave the order right away. "Cancel the funeral. Everyone leave now." "No, you can't cancel it. It's pouring." My brother's ashes. Panicked, Madeline lunged for the urn in the center and shielded it with her body. Xavier cast a cold glance her way and addressed the 2 remaining bodyguards. "Make sure she stays here to cool off." With that, he scooped Daniela up and hurried off. The rain poured harder, drenching the empty cemetery. The 2 bodyguards exchanged a look and slowly closed in. "Ms. Pinson, don't blame us. Blame yourself for going against Ms. Leonard." One of them grabbed her arm roughly, slamming her down into the mud. The other stepped forward, raised his foot, and kicked over the urn she clung to. The lid flew open. White ashes spilled out, instantly swallowed and scattered by the murky rain, mixing into the mud. "No. Ryan." Madeline let out a heart-wrenching wail. She pushed one guard away, crawling forward desperately, trying in vain to scoop up the mud mixed with Ryland's ashes. Rain mixed with tears, blurring everything around her. She had no idea when the bodyguards left. She knelt in the cold downpour, motionlessly holding the urn, now empty of ashes and filled with mud. That night, a high fever consumed Madeline. In her delirium, she returned to the sunlit orphanage. Little Ryan hid behind her, giggling. "Maddie, come find me." She turned with a smile, reached out, only to touch a cold hand. In the dream, Xavier turned around slowly, smiling at her softly. The next second, that smile warped into something gloomy and ferocious. "How dare you sleep?" A sharp shout rang out. A searing pain shot through her. Xavier ignored her swollen forehead and glazed eyes. He dragged her from the bed as if she were a piece of lifeless trash, hauling her disgracefully out of the bedroom and down the stairs. Her body hit the hard stairs repeatedly, making dull thuds. The impacts jarred her bones, making her head spin and her stomach churn. Finally, she was thrown onto the cold marble floor of the living room. Xavier's cold, unyielding command echoed above her. "On your knees. Apologize to Ella." Madeline thought the fever had conjured a hallucination, but the sharp sting at her temple and Xavier's icy stare confirmed this was a cruel reality. "Apologize," He spoke clearly, his voice sharp and clear. "Did you not hear me?" He took a step forward, his voice dripping with undisguised accusation. Ella slept restlessly all night from the shock. She was delirious from a high fever. If I hadn't stayed with her, can you even imagine what might have happened? The first thing she did when she woke up was beg me to go easy on you. And what did you do? You stayed in her room all night? Madeline's voice was hoarse, trembling with disbelief. Xavier flinched at the sudden surge of despair and accusation in her eyes. He then masked his panic with an even colder tone. "She's my sister. She was traumatized and needed someone with her. What's the problem with that? Madeline, look at yourself. You're a mess." "Xavi, don't be mad at Maddie." Daniela piped up weakly at just the right moment, her face pale as she tugged at Xavier's sleeve. Tears welled up in her eyes fast. "It's all my fault. I was being childish, insisting you stay with me. Maddie's just really heartbroken. She didn't mean any harm." Xavier pulled her into his arms right away, his eyes soft with pity. His gaze shifted to Madeline with pure disgust. "You hear that? Even now, she's defending you. Madeline, Ryan's death was an accident, but that doesn't give you the right to act recklessly. Go make Ella some broth to soothe her mind. Make it yourself. Consider it your apology." Madeline's hands at her sides curled into fists suddenly, her fingertips cold. A sharp, stinging ache shot straight to her nose. In days, she felt like she was back to right after their wedding. Back then, he had a stomach problem. She'd clumsily burned her hand trying to cook him some broth. He grabbed her hand, blowing on the burn and rubbing it gently, his eyes glistening with tears. "Your hands are so delicate. You shouldn't be doing this. You're never setting foot in the kitchen again." That command had become a sweet rule she'd followed for years. Now, the man who'd made the rule was personally breaking it for another woman. She didn't argue. She dragged her aching body into the kitchen in silence. Steam billowed up, scalding the back of her hand and causing some painful blisters, but the burning on her skin paled in comparison to the raw, hollow ache in her chest. When she returned, carrying the steaming bowl, Xavier's attention never wavered from Daniela. He took the bowl from her, carefully blowing on it to cool it down. Then, right in front of Madeline, he raised the spoon to Daniela's lips. Daniela looked up, darting a quick but venomous glance at Madeline over Xavier's shoulder. Then she leaned in toward the spoon, only to let out a sudden shriek and knock the bowl flying hard. Most of the scalding liquid splashed directly onto Madeline's forearm before she could move. A terrible burning pain shot through her skin instantly. Her entire forearm turned bright red and swollen, covered in a cluster of blisters. "Xavi, it burns." Daniela clapped a hand over her mouth and burst into tears. "Did Maddie do this on purpose? Does she still hate me that much?" "My mouth. It hurts so bad." Xavier's face darkened instantly. Without even glancing at the ruin of Madeline's injured arm, he urgently cupped Daniela's face. "Ella, don't be scared. Let me take a look." He actually leaned in and blew gently on her perfectly unharmed lips, his voice soft. "The pain's gone now, see? I'm blowing on it. You'll be okay." The sight of their foreheads touching, their breaths mingling together, made Madeline's heart ache greatly. The searing pain in her arm was nothing compared to this agony. After soothing the sniffling Daniela, Xavier turned around. He glanced at Madeline's ruined arm, frowned in disgust, and then lifted his chin at the bodyguards. "Grab her." Madeline's eyes widened in horror. "What are you going to do?" Xavier's voice was calm yet chilling. "You need to pay for your mistake. You hurt Ella. You terrified her." He paused, then gave the order clearly. "Slap her. 20 times. Make sure she remembers what she can and cannot do." The bodyguards stepped forward expressionlessly, pinning Madeline down easily from both sides as she struggled weakly. One of them raised his hand and slapped her across the face. The first slap rang out loud and clear, jolting her head to the side. The barely healed wound on her forehead split open, oozing tiny streaks of blood. The blows kept coming, one after another, heavy and methodical. At first, it was a searing sting. Then it quickly turned into a dull, numbing ache. Her ears were ringing, and her vision started blurring. Blood and saliva trickled from her split lip, mixing with sweat or tears. She couldn't tell. Xavier just stood there coldly, his arm wrapped around Daniela. When the last slap landed and the bodyguards let go of the limp Madeline, Xavier turned his head and asked Daniela softly, "Does that make you feel better?" Daniela buried her face in his chest and nodded slowly. She lifted her head from his chest and quickly glanced at Madeline, who was in a messy state on the floor. A flicker of triumph and smug satisfaction flashed in her eyes. "Come on. I'll take you to the hospital to get checked out. Don't let it get infected." Xavier wrapped his arm around Daniela and walked out without looking back. The heavy door closed, shutting out everything. Madeline looked around the familiar house and let out a bitter, broken laugh. Back in the bedroom, she dragged a dusty storage box from under the bed. Inside lay faded stuffed animals, tattered fairy tale books, an old photo of the two of them huddled together at the orphanage, and all the little things he'd given her over the years that she'd treasured. Brooches, hair clips, a souvenir mug with her name on it. She sat on the floor, placing each item into an empty cardboard box one by one. Her movements were slow and gentle. Then she picked up the box, walked down the stairs, and stepped out of the place that had once been her home in the corner of the yard. She doused everything inside the box with gasoline. The lighter flicked to life, producing a tiny blue flame. The flame arced through the air before landing in the box as she decisively tossed it onto it. The firelight illuminated her pale, calm face, burning away the last traces of warmth left in her heart. She pulled out her phone and sent a text to her lawyer. "Draw up the divorce papers. Make it fast." Madeline had just finished packing her suitcase when the bedroom door was kicked open. Xavier stormed in, his face livid with rage. His eyes darted to the suitcase, and the chill in his eyes deepened. He grabbed her and slammed her roughly onto the floor. "Packing up? Trying to run away?" His voice was cold. "You think you can just walk away after what you did?" The back of Madeline's head hit the hard floor, sending a wave of dizziness crashing over her. She propped herself up on trembling arms, her throat parched. "What are you talking about? Cut the act." He jabbed a finger at her, almost touching her nose. "Ella had your broth and broke out in a rash all over her body. It's red, itchy, and starting to blister. The doctors can't identify the allergen." "What the hell did you put in that broth?" "The herbs were the ones you bought before." She spoke with difficulty, black spots in her vision. "You said I was pulling too many all-nighters on the project, that I needed to calm my nerves." "Shut up." Mentioning the past infuriated Xavier further. The rage in his eyes burned fiercer. "Madeline, I was so blind. I never knew you could be this vicious. You're jealous of her, so you stooped to this despicable trick." He didn't wait for her to respond, yelling sharply toward the door, "Bring it in." A bodyguard marched in at once, holding a tray with a cup filled with fine, orange-yellow powder. Madeline's eyes widened in horror. It was mango powder. 3 years ago, he'd asked his buddy to make her a mango cake. She'd taken one bite and nearly died from the allergic reaction. That night, he'd sat outside the ER, holding her hand and swearing he'd never let any mango product near her again. The promise still echoed in her ears, but now it felt like a cruel, mocking joke. No, she tried to scramble back, but the bodyguard expertly kicked the back of her knee hard, sending her crashing to the floor. A fierce grip clamped down on her jaw, prying it open. The handful of powder was forced down her throat without mercy. She erupted into a fit of coughing. Some of the powder choked her airways, most of it sliding down her throat. The reaction was vicious and immediate, attacking her body without mercy. An intense burning and maddening itch erupted across her body, spreading with terrifying speed from her mouth and throat to her neck and limbs. Her throat was a raw, burning ache. Every breath felt raw in her swollen airways. She curled up on the floor, her hands scratching wildly at her neck, leaving deep, bloody gashes in their wake. Tears of agony blurred her vision. She reached out toward him, her voice broken. "Help! Help me!" It hurt so bad, but Xavier just stood there coldly, looking down at her as she writhed in agony. "Cut the act." His voice was cruel in its calmness. "It's just dyed orange powder. I was only trying to scare you. Now, are you ready to tell the truth? What did you put in the broth?" Madeline couldn't hear him anymore. A deafening ring filled her ears. Her vision started go black, his face dissolving into a blur. Through the haze, she thought she saw his lips moving, a flicker of panic crossing his face. "Honey." Darkness swallowed her completely. The smell of antiseptic filled her nose. Madeline forced her eyes open and saw the hospital's pale ceiling and Xavier's haggard face. She'd been unconscious for an entire day. The agony of the allergic reaction still lingered. Her throat was still swollen, rendering her voiceless. "Honey, you're awake." He took her hand in his eyes red-rimmed. His voice was soft, laced with manufactured guilt. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea they'd grab mango juice concentrate instead. I was so angry. I just wanted to scare you. It was all my fault." He paused, before speaking with a tone laced with a hint of accusation. "But why do you keep provoking Ella like this? If you hadn't pushed her, I never would've. How did we end up like this?" Madeline watched his performance silently, the corner of her mouth twitching faintly. That was it. In the end, it was still her fault. He pulled 2 documents out of his bag right on cue, handing them to her. His voice was soft but unyielding. "Sign these. Transfer those core patents of yours to Ella, and give her 20% of your shares. After the ordeal you put her through, some compensation is only fair. Sign them, and we can put all this behind us." Madeline's head shot up. Her swollen throat forced out a hoarse, raspy whisper. "You want me to hand over all my hard work and my shares to her? Xavier, are you insane, or am I?" The fake warmth in his eyes vanished the second she refused, replaced by cold, unyielding resolve. "We're past the point of discussion." He shoved a pen into her hand, his grip tight. "Don't make me do this the hard way." Madeline stared at the pen, then at the unshakable determination in his eyes. She knew this wasn't a negotiation. She smiled, or rather, it was more of a grimace than a smile. "Fine. But in exchange, you give me a house." She pulled the prepared divorce papers out and handed them to him. Xavier's eyes were filled with impatience and disgust. He signed the papers without even glancing at them, urging her on. "There. Now it's your turn." He tossed the documents back at her. How ironic. He couldn't even be bothered to read the terms of the divorce. Then she bowed her head and scrawled her name across the papers quickly. The handwriting was scrawled, yet it held a fierce, unyielding finality. "Xavier." She tossed the pen aside, her blank gaze locking onto his. "You're going to regret this." He acted like he didn't hear her, checking her signature quickly before tucking the papers away. His expression turned cold and distant. "Get some rest. Tomorrow is our 5th wedding anniversary. I'll come pick you up." After saying that, he turned and walked out of the hospital room without looking back. The next day, Xavier came to pick her up from the hospital. He carried an exquisite gift box in his hand, snuggling into her arms in a fawning manner. As if everything that had happened before was nothing but a bad dream, she had. A wave of unfamiliar, pungent women's perfume assaulted her senses, making Madeline's stomach churn. She pushed him away without betraying any emotion. "Honey, happy anniversary." He seemed oblivious, opening the box to reveal a dazzling diamond necklace. "Do you like it?" Madeline closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, a gentle smile had already formed at the corners of her mouth. "What a coincidence, I also prepared a surprise for you. It will arrive in a few days." "Really?" He rarely showed such a gentle smile. Now I'm actually looking forward to it." He gently cupped her face, his tone unusually tender. "Honey, after the annual party is over, I'll have Ella go abroad to set up the new company. Let's live a good life together from now on, okay?" Seeing her silence, he thought she had agreed, and his smile grew even wider. "I've booked a restaurant, just for the two of us. I'll go down and get the car ready. Wait for me." He had just left when his phone vibrated. A message from Daniela popped up. "Did you get the gift? Are you touched?" "Haha, that's just a freebie that came with the necklace Xavier gave me last night. I thought it was too cheap, but Xavier said not to waste it, so he gave it to you." Take a closer look at the bottom of the box. Zooming in on the picture, there was a faint engraving at the bottom of the box. "Not for sale." Madeline's fingers tightened abruptly around her phone, her knuckles turning white. It felt as if her heart had been stabbed unexpectedly by a cold needle. Even after her heart had died, sharp humiliation could still bring pain. Several more images popped up on the screen. The moment she opened them, her pupils contracted sharply. "You look pale." In the car, Xavier glanced at her through the rearview mirror. "It's nothing." She gazed out the window. The restaurant had an elegant atmosphere. However, when Madeline saw the smiling figure waiting by the window, her steps suddenly halted. "Daniela." She looked sharply at Xavier, her gaze turning icy. "It's our wedding anniversary. Why is she here?" Xavier avoided her eyes, his fingers brushing over the quartz cover of his watch, his voice dropping a few notches. "Ella isn't an outsider. She helped arrange everything tonight." "Don't be so petty." "Petty?" Madeline was stunned for a second, then let out a low laugh, which grew louder and louder until cold tears welled up at the corners of her eyes. She would be leaving him soon, so why should she care anymore when the dishes were served? Every single one was to Daniela's taste. Xavier seemed completely unaware, focusing on serving her food, pouring wine, cutting the steak, and carefully blowing on it before bringing it to her lips. The two of them chatted and laughed, exchanging affectionate glances. Madeline sat silently across from them, like an outsider. She watched, feeling as if her heart was being slowly strangled by a wet hemp rope, a suffocating dull pain spreading through her. After the meal, as they walked through the center of the lobby, a faint click sounded overhead. Madeline had just looked up. "LLA, watch out." Xavier let out a terrified scream, suddenly shoving her aside and, without hesitation, lunged toward Daniela a few steps away, shielding her with his body. Bang! The heavy crystal chandelier crashed down, shattering into pieces. Madeline felt a tremendous force hit her, slamming half her body hard against the floor. The edge of the shattered chandelier scraped her arm, instantly causing blood to pour out. A sharp pain shot through her temple, and warm liquid blurred her vision. Amid the ringing in her ears, she struggled to lift her eyes. She saw Xavier scrambling up in panic, his first reaction to anxiously check on Daniela in his arms. "Ella, are you okay? Are you hurt? Don't be afraid, I'm here." His voice trembled, and from beginning to end, his gaze never once turned to her. Bleeding on the floor, Madeline lay trembling among the cold shards. She struggled, using her uninjured arm to prop herself up, staggering over to his side. Blood from her forehead sliding past her brow and dripping down. "Xavier." Her voice was weak and hoarse. "Take me to the hospital." Only then did Xavier turn around. Seeing her covered in blood, he was startled and instinctively reached out. "Xavier, my stomach hurts so much. My head is spinning." Daniela let out a timely groan of pain, clutching her abdomen and collapsing into his arms with a pale face. His outstretched hand immediately turned to tightly support Daniela, his tone urgent. "Are you scared? We'll go to the hospital right away." He hurriedly turned back, speaking rapidly. "Maddie, hang in there. I'll call an ambulance. Ella is weak. We can't delay." With that, he half carried, half supported Daniela, turning without hesitation and rushing out the door. Never looking back, Madeline stood where she was, watching his disappearing figure. It felt as if a huge hole had opened in her chest, letting the cold wind howl through. The restaurant manager hurried over with staff, clumsily bandaging her wounds. She sat alone amid the chaos, watching Xavier's car speed away outside the window. At last, she let out a low laugh, and as she laughed, silent tears slid down her cheeks. On the night of the annual gala, when Xavier walked into the banquet hall with Daniela nestled in his arm, the entire room fell silent for a moment. He even paused, and under the gaze of everyone, carefully tucked Daniela's hair behind her ear. His fingertips brushing her earlobe, his gentle smile almost blinding. Countless glances, veiled and subtle, shifted toward Madeline in the corner. Contempt, pity, and schadenfreude pricked like countless tiny needles. She acted as if she heard nothing, her expression unchanged. In the center of the hall, Xavier was cheerfully and generously introducing Daniela to the important guests, his words full of support and encouragement. Madeline sat alone in the shadows, watching like an outsider. Suddenly, her phone vibrated. Her lawyer sent a message. "Ms. Pinson, the divorce decree is ready and on its way to you." Almost at the same time, Xavier's clear voice rang out from the stage. "Everyone, taking advantage of tonight, I have something important to announce." A low murmur of discussion rose from the audience. "He must be announcing the new vice president, right?" "Of course. It has to be Miss Pinson. She built this company from the ground up." Some people even approached Madeline to congratulate her in advance. She merely nodded slightly, and to her own surprise, a faint hope stirred in her heart. Until Xavier's next words shattered all illusions like an ice pick. For a company to grow, it cannot rest on past achievements. Some people have long since failed to keep up with the company's pace and vision. A deathly silence fell over the room. All eyes once again focused on Madeline, but Xavier had already turned, looking at Daniela by his side. The perennial frost in his eyes melted into a pool of tenderness, overflowing with undisguised affection. "I hereby announce that, effective immediately, Ms. Leonard will serve as the company's vice president." Applause broke out hesitantly, then grew enthusiastic. Xavier took a custom-made brooch from his assistant and pinned it on Daniela himself. Then he opened a red velvet box, took out a uniquely designed ring, and solemnly placed it on her finger. Someone in the audience started chanting, "Kiss. Kiss." Daniela's ears turned red as she looked shyly at Xavier. He smiled, neither refusing nor moving closer, but the matching ring on his own finger said everything that needed to be said. Madeline calmly joined in the applause, then straightened her immaculate suit, stood up, and walked unhurriedly toward the exit of the banquet hall. In the parking lot, the night breeze was slightly chilly. She had just opened her car door when Daniela came running after her. "Maddie, why are you leaving so soon? The real show is just beginning." Daniela waved her hand, showing off the ring, her smile full of a victor's provocation. "Xavier said I'm the one who will stay with him until the end." "You? You're already history." Madeline responded with a cold laugh. "A mistress who climbed up by wrecking someone else's marriage dares to bark in front of me? Remember, as long as I haven't signed, I'm still his legal wife. And you will always be hidden in the shadows." Daniela's face changed instantly, twisted by the sting of the word mistress. She was about to explode, but Madeline couldn't be bothered and got straight into the driver's seat. Closing the door. As the engine started, the headlights illuminated Daniela's face, now contorted with malice. The next second, before Madeline could react, Daniela suddenly lunged forward and slammed her head hard against the hood. Bang! A dull thud was followed by a cry of pain, sharp as shattering glass. "Ella!" Xavier's anguished scream echoed through the parking lot. He rushed out from the banquet hall with a group of people, throwing himself at Daniela, who lay on the ground with blood streaming from her forehead. "Call an ambulance," he shouted hoarsely, then suddenly turned, his eyes blazing with destructive fury, yanking open Madeline's car door and dragging her out violently. Madeline. His fingernails scratched her arm, leaving bloody marks. I told you we could live a good life. Why can't you just leave her alone? Will you only be satisfied if you drive her to death? Madeline looked at the man before her, his eyes bloodshot and nearly deranged. The stinging pain in her arm was nothing compared to the icy chill that froze her heart. No matter what I say, she heard her own voice, dry and hoarse. You won't believe me, will you? No. Xavier's roar was absolute, each word like a poison nail. I only believe Ella. She's so kind. Would she really risk her life to falsely accuse you? Madeline's lips twisted into a smile more painful than tears. She gave up. Her silence completely ignited the last shred of Xavier's sanity. He pointed at her and shouted at the bodyguards, "Hold her down." Two bodyguards immediately stepped forward, gripping Madeline tightly. Without even glancing at her, Xavier turned and got into her car, started the engine, and slammed the accelerator to the floor. The engine roared. Xavier, are you insane? Stop. Madeline's pupils contracted sharply as she shouted in warning. Her only answer was the screech of tires against the pavement and the black shadow of the car charging at her like a runaway beast. Bang. The heavy impact sounded like muffled thunder. Madeline felt her body suddenly become weightless, like a falling leaf tossed into the air, tracing a brief arc before crashing heavily onto the concrete 5 meters away. It felt as if every bone in her body shattered. A tsunami of pain swallowing all consciousness. A constant ringing filled her ears as her vision was quickly devoured by crimson and darkness. Just before she was completely swallowed by the dark, the last blurry image she saw was Xavier's panic-stricken face rushing toward her, and in the distance, Daniela being helped up, a cold, triumphant smile curling at her lips. She regained consciousness once again, in a hospital room. Bandages were wrapped around various parts of her body, and even the slightest movement brought searing pain. There was not a single person by her bedside. The caregiver spoke cautiously. Mr. Kenward hasn't come by these past few days. She picked up her phone. The first post on Instagram was a photo Xavier had shared, azure sea and sky, him standing shirtless on a yacht deck, smiling radiantly beside Daniela in a bikini. The location tag showed a vacation island on the other side of the world. At the same time, a text message popped up from Xavier. Ella was frightened and is in a bad mood, so I'm keeping her company to help her relax. Don't overthink things, just focus on recovering. By the way, in 3 days, Asteroid S9 will officially launch. The industry and media will all be present. You must be there to assist Ella and make sure nothing goes wrong. After this, we'll settle down for a good life. I'll allow you to have a child with me. Madeline stared at the screen and couldn't help but let out a cold laugh. What made him think that, after everything, she would still foolishly exhaust herself for him, paving the way for his and another woman's bright future? He had always advocated for a child-free life, yet now, just to clear the path for Daniela, he was willing to compromise and give her a child. What an absurd joke. Placing the brown envelope containing the divorce agreement on the living room table, she picked up her phone and dialed a stranger's number. Come pick me up. Now. An hour later, a black sedan silently left the hospital, heading for the airport. In the car, Madeline opened her laptop, connected to an encrypted network, and her fingers flew across the keyboard. She remotely logged into the company's core server and packaged all the underlying architecture code, core algorithms, and test data for Asteroid S9 for download. Then, she opened a hidden program named after her birthday and entered the final string of commands. On the screen, a bright red countdown began. 72:00:00. In 72 hours, all related code and data on the server would be irreversibly destroyed and overwritten. After finishing everything, she closed her laptop, leaned back into the seat and shut her eyes. Asterisk on the day of the Asteroid S9 launch event. The venue was packed to capacity. Xavier, dressed in a bespoke suit and looking energetic, personally escorted Daniela to the guest of honor seats. Daniela's face was flushed with irrepressible excitement, as if she could already see herself ascending to the industry's pantheon, the center of everyone's attention. Yet for some reason, Xavier felt restless and uneasy, his right eyelid twitching uncontrollably. He looked around, but the one person who should have been there to ensure everything went smoothly was nowhere to be seen. Mr. Kenward, we still can't reach Miss Pinson. The assistant leaned in again, reporting in a low voice, sweat already visible on his forehead. Xavier clenched his fists, forcing down a wave of inexplicable anxiety. We won't wait any longer. All the materials are here. Ella can handle it. The launch event proceeded according to plan. Daniela took the stage and, reading from the teleprompter, introduced the system's highlights in ornate but empty language. When it came to the crucial live demonstration and monitoring segment, the big screen connected to real-road test vehicle data. A piercing alarm suddenly blared throughout the venue without warning. What's going on? Xavier sprang to his feet. The technical director, pale as a sheet, rushed over, his voice trembling. Mr. Kenward, the servers have completely crashed. All online test vehicle systems are out of control. Multiple collisions have already occurred. The transportation department's phones are ringing off the hook. The police are on their way. What? Xavier's vision went black, and he staggered, barely kept upright by his assistant. How could this happen? Where's Madeline? What is she doing? Several core engineers exchanged glances, their faces as white as paper. Mr. Kenward, we can't reach Miss Pinson. Now, we can only rely on Ms. Leonard. Isn't she the technical expert? Everyone's eyes turned in unison to Daniela, who was frozen on stage, completely at a loss. The venue erupted into chaos as reporters swarmed forward. Ella, please, help fix this. His voice was trembling. Daniela didn't dare meet his gaze, lowering her head and mumbling guiltily, Xavier. I don't know how. Xavier's mind buzzed, and he felt the world spinning. She didn't know how. How could she not know? He looked at the chaotic scene and the incessant calls for accountability, his vision darkening again and again. Find. His voice was hoarse as he grabbed his assistant's arm, his nails nearly digging into the flesh. No matter what it takes, at any cost. Immediately, right now, find Madeline for me. The press conference was in utter chaos. Xavier stood at the side of the stage, watching Daniela flounder helplessly under the spotlight, and for the first time realized he might have made a fatal mistake. Mr. Kenward, the Department of Transportation is calling again. The assistant, face ashen, held up the phone. There was a 7-car pileup on Beltway 8. Our test vehicle is fully responsible. Shut down the big screen. Stop the demonstration. Xavier forced himself to sound calm as he gave the order, but there was an almost imperceptible tremor in his voice. It was too late. On social media, the hashtag Asteroid S9 Fatal Flaw had shot to the top trending topic within half an hour. Videos from the scene were being frantically shared, with glaring captions. Kenward Tech disregards human life. Genius CEO persona collapses. 2 days later, in the Kenward Group's conference room, both sides of the long table were filled with directors, all wearing grave expressions. The stock price hit the limit down at opening, and the market value has evaporated by $1.2 billion. The CFO's voice was especially harsh in the silence. 3 partners sent termination letters this morning, and the bank has started to call in the loans. An elderly director with white hair tapped the table. Mr. Kenward, we need an explanation and a solution. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Xavier. He was still impeccably dressed, his demeanor unchanged, but the dark circles under his eyes betrayed his current desperate state. In the past 3 days, he had slept less than 10 hours. The technical team is working around the clock to fix it. Fix it. Another director cut him off sharply. With whom? With Daniela, who can't even read basic code, up there on stage. An awkward silence fell over the conference room. We need Madeline, the elderly director said slowly, voicing what everyone was thinking. Only she can clean up this mess. Xavier's fingers tightened under the table. I'll contact her. Not contact bring her back, the old director stared at him. By any means necessary, whatever it takes. Mr. Kenward, this company is not your personal toy. After the meeting, Xavier returned to his office and locked the door behind him. He collapsed into his leather chair, finally letting down all his defenses. On his phone screen, he had dialed Madeline's number over 100 times, but it was always the same, powered off. The red exclamation mark in front of his WhatsApp messages stung his eyes. Maddie, he murmured softly, his voice carrying a plea he himself hadn't noticed, unwilling to give up. He opened the text message interface again, his fingers trembling as he typed, Maddie, I know I was wrong. The company needs you, I need you too. Please come back, let's talk, okay? He pressed send, but the message vanished like a stone sinking into the sea. He stared at the screen, waiting for the faint hope of a read notification, but nothing appeared. Outside, the sky gradually darkened, neon lights flickering on one by one, illuminating Houston's bustling night. But he sat in his deathly silent office, feeling nothing but cold. He didn't know how much time had passed before there was a knock at the door. Mr. Kenward? It was the assistant's cautious voice. Xavier sat up abruptly, as if grasping at his last straw. Well? Did you reach her? The assistant entered, looking even more distressed than at the press conference. Is it Maddie? Has she come back? Xavier asked urgently, a trace of nervous hope in his tone. The assistant lowered his head, his voice barely audible. Mr. Kenward. The tech department says Miss Pinson's access was revoked 3 days ago. What? Xavier was stunned. Who revoked it? System logs show it was Miss Pinson herself remotely. She also wiped her entire personal workspace and took all local backups of the core code with her. A chill shot from Xavier's feet to the top of his head. When did she leave? It should have been the day before the press conference. Airport records show Miss Pinson took a flight that night to San Francisco. San Francisco. Xavier remembered that long ago. Madeline had said that was where the world's top AI labs were, the place where her academic dreams had begun. Back then, he had smiled and held her hand, saying, why go to San Francisco? Stay in Houston. Start a company with me. Together, we can change the world. She saw the light in his eyes, nodded, and stayed. She stayed for 8 years, and now she was gone. After he had crushed all her dignity, her hard work, and even her only brother for the sake of another woman, she had finally left. Did she leave any message? Xavier heard his own voice trembling. The assistant was silent for a few seconds before replying softly. The front desk said that on the day Miss Pinson left, she only had a small suitcase. She stood at the door for a while, looked back at the building, then left without saying a word. Not a word, not even a goodbye, a question, or a look of hatred. She left him nothing. Suddenly, Xavier started to laugh, and as he laughed, tears rolled down his face. The assistant sighed softly, dared not say more, and quickly left, gently closing the door behind him. The office fell silent once again. Xavier slumped in his chair, staring at the cold white light on the ceiling, his vision going black in waves. He remembered their wedding night, when Madeline wrapped her arms around his neck and said, Xavier, from now on, my world is only you. He remembered Ryan's 17th birthday, when Ryan clung to his arm and said playfully, Xavier, you and my sister must always be happy. He remembered countless late nights when she fell asleep at her lab desk, surrounded by sheets of paper covered in formulas, and what had he given her in return? Suspicion, exploitation, and for the sake of another woman, He had pushed her into the abyss again and again. He had even watched Ryan die in that so-called accident. What have I done? Xavier covered his face, his whole body shaking with laughter, but tears poured through his fingers. He was truly a fool. A fool who used the one who truly loved him as a stepping stone, while cherishing a viper in his hand. His phone rang. It was Daniela. Without even looking, he pressed the power button and turned it off. At last, the world was completely silent. He didn't know how long he sat slumped in the chair, until the sky outside was pitch black. Only then did he stagger to his feet, grab his coat, and leave the office. On the drive home, neon lights flickered past the car windows, bright and dim, like a nightmare from which he could not wake. He turned on the radio. Just as the financial news was being broadcast, the Kenward Group's Asteroid S9 press conference disaster continues to ferment. Today, the stock price hit the limit down again, and nearly $1.6 billion in market value has evaporated. He switched off the radio, floored the accelerator, and the car sped down the empty road. Tears kept streaming down his face, but he didn't bother to wipe them away. By the time he got home, it was already late at night. He stumbled into the empty house, took a bottle of whiskey from the cabinet, and drank straight from the bottle. The burning liquor scorched his throat, but could not warm his heart, which was already frozen. His gaze swept across the living room and suddenly stopped at the coffee table. There lay an ordinary brown paper file envelope, with no label, so quiet it was almost eerie. He remembered that 3 days ago, when he left home, this thing was not there. A strange chill quietly crept up his spine. He put down the bottle, walked over step by step, and carefully unsealed the envelope. The first document slid out: a divorce decree. Xavier's hand suddenly trembled, and the document fell to the floor. He crouched down to pick it up, his hands shaking as he opened it. The photo of him and Madeline was still there. Only now a cold cancellation stamp was pressed between them. The cooling-off period has passed. Neither party was present, so it is considered a voluntary divorce. He read those words, each one stabbing into his eyes like a needle. How could this be? He clearly hadn't signed anything. A memory suddenly flashed in the hospital room. He had thrown the share transfer agreement to her, and she signed it without a word. Then, she handed him a document as well, and he signed it without even looking. So, that was the divorce agreement. So, she had planned to leave all along. There was a second item in the envelope: a medical report. His medical report from the private hospital he often visited 3 months ago. On the last page, in the diagnosis section, it read, "Suspicious lesion found in the stomach. Further biopsy recommended. Be alert for possible early cancerous changes." A sticky note was attached to the edge of the report, the familiar handwriting stinging his eyes. Final reminder, take care. It was Madeline's handwriting. Xavier collapsed onto the carpet, the divorce decree and medical report scattered around him, leaning against the cold sofa. His body began to tremble uncontrollably. Madeline really didn't want him anymore. His phone vibrated. It was a message from Daniela. "Xavi, you haven't come to see me for days. I'm scared. Those reporters are always downstairs. Can you come and stay with me?" In the past, seeing a message like this, he would have dropped everything and rushed over immediately. But now, Xavier stared at the screen and, for the first time, didn't reply. It rained all night. Xavier sat on the carpet all night, until the morning light slipped through the blinds, illuminating the cancellation stamp on the divorce decree. He slowly got up, his legs so numb they were almost useless. Walking into the bathroom, the person in the mirror looked so haggard he was almost unrecognizable. Bloodshot eyes, stubble darkening his jaw, as if he had aged 10 years overnight. "Xavier, you can't collapse." He spoke to his reflection, his voice hoarse. "The company still needs you." But as soon as he said this, he suddenly remembered the looks in those people's eyes at the meeting. That wasn't need, it was blame. He splashed water on his face. forcing himself to calm down. The divorce was final. The threat of cancer hung over him. But right now he had more urgent matters to deal with. At that moment, his phone rang. It was a call from the hospital. "Mr. Kenward, your biopsy results are ready. If possible, we recommend you come to the hospital as soon as you can." Xavier hung up the phone and steadied himself against the wall as he stood. He looked up at the sky. Some of the dark clouds had parted, revealing a small patch of pale blue. What must be faced, whether it was cancer or the disaster he had brought upon himself. An hour later, in the hospital consultation room. "What is the success rate of the surgery?" Xavier asked calmly. "If we start treatment now, the 5-year survival rate is over 80%. But if you delay, how much will it cost?" The doctor paused for a moment. "The surgery and subsequent treatment are expected to cost around $100,000. "I understand." Xavier stood up. "I'll make arrangements as soon as possible." After leaving the consultation room, he sat down on a bench in the hospital corridor. All around him were patients and their families, coming and going, some crying, some praying, some numb with exhaustion. Xavier took the medical report out of his bag and looked again at the sticky note Madeline had left. One last reminder: take care. She had known all along. Even when he himself neglected his health, she was still concerned about him. And what had he given her in return? Suspicion, hurt, and pushing her again and again into the abyss for the sake of another man. Xavier buried his face in his hands, his shoulders beginning to shake violently. This time, he didn't try to hold back. Tears spilled through his fingers, burning hot against his skin. I'm sorry, Maddie. I'm sorry, Ryan. But what's the point of saying this now?" He didn't know how much time had passed before he wiped away his tears and stood up again. His phone, the man reflected in the screen, had swollen, red eyes, but there was a new in his gaze. He dialed his assistant. "Arrange a press conference for tomorrow morning. I want to make a public apology. Also, use every resource available. I want Madeline found, no matter the cost." On the other end, the assistant hesitated. "Mr. Kenward, what about Ms. Leonard?" Xavier was silent for 2 seconds. "Don't tell her for now." The press conference was scheduled for 10 a.m. the next day in the Kenward Group headquarters multifunctional hall. By 9 o'clock, the area outside the venue was already packed with reporters. Cameras of all sizes were aimed at the entrance. Everyone wanted to capture the first image of Xavier's fall from grace. In the backstage lounge, the assistant looked at Xavier's haggard face, wanting to speak but hesitating. "Mr. Kenward, your complexion. It's nothing." Xavier closed his eyes, his voice calm and steady. At 9:50, the assistant entered, looking anxious. "Mr. Kenward, there are over 300 media outlets outside, as well as investor representatives and families of the accident victims. Is the statement ready?" "It's ready. But Mr. Kenward, the board says you can apologize, but you can't admit to any fundamental technical flaws. All responsibility should be shifted to Ms. Leonard for now." "No, absolutely not. If you do that, Ella's reputation will be completely destroyed." Xavier cut him off. The assistant handed over the tablet. Xavier quickly skimmed the carefully worded, responsibility-shifting statement. A mocking smile tugging at his lips. He set the tablet on the table and took out a handwritten page from his pocket. "Use this." The assistant took it, and after reading just a few lines, his face changed dramatically. "Mr. Kenward, this is equivalent to admitting all responsibility. The company could face astronomical claims, and you personally might be held accountable. At that moment, an employee handed another tablet to the assistant. He glanced at it and his expression changed drastically. "Mr. Kenward, look. This is the complete video of the incident at the Wax Museum with Ryan." Just as Xavier was about to take the tablet, another employee hurried over to urge him. He seemed not to have heard the assistant's words, withdrew his hand, and said indifferently, Leave the tablet on my desk. I'll look at it later. For now, I need to deal with the media and the families outside. Also, contact the tech department. I want all the operation logs and surveillance footage from backstage on the day of the press conference. I need them right now. The assistant dared not say anything more and hurried away. At exactly 10 o'clock. Xavier stepped onto the stage for the press conference. Flashes poured down like a torrential rain, and the sound of shutters clicked incessantly. He wore a simple white shirt and black trousers. His eyes were ashen, so dim that he seemed nothing like the strong and domineering CEO he used to be. He first calmly took full responsibility, then resolutely resigned from his position as CEO. The entire venue was in an uproar. Secondly, Xavier raised his voice above the commotion. I sincerely ask Ms. Pinson to return in my own name. Only she can truly solve the technical problems and prevent more tragedies from happening. The reporters could no longer hold back and all raised their hands to ask questions. Mr. Kenward, since you admit there were technical flaws, does that mean Ms. Leonard actually lacks the ability to develop the product? What is your relationship with Ms. Leonard? Why did you insist on letting her take charge of the core project despite all the opposition? Will Ms. Pinson come back? Are you using your past relationship to morally coerce her? Xavier did not answer any questions about Daniela. He simply repeated, my only request now is for Ms. Pinson to return. Only she can save this project and prevent more families from being hurt. The press conference ended hastily. Escorted by security, Xavier left in a hurry, leaving countless questions behind. Back in the office, the technical director Javon Moore was already waiting there, visibly nervous. Mr. Kenward, these are the backstage logs and surveillance from the day of the press conference. He placed a USB drive on the desk. But some of the data may have already been aired. What do you mean? Javon lowered his voice. The system logs show that Ms. Leonard did not perform any valid operations during the demonstration. All the preset demo code was packaged in advance by Ms. Pinson. Ms. Leonard only clicked the run button. Xavier took the USB drive and plugged it into the computer. On the surveillance footage, Daniela on stage was reading from the teleprompter word for word, while the technical team below was in chaos when the alarm sounded. Her first reaction was to look toward him at the side of the stage, her eyes full of panic and helplessness, an expression that should never belong to a technical lead. The log files were even more direct. User Daniela had 0 recorded operations on the system during the critical period. She truly didn't know anything. Xavier closed his eyes and took a deep breath, but his lips moved almost imperceptibly, his voice trembling. No. Ella is a genius, she said. She said she would help me grow the company. When he opened his eyes again, a deep exhaustion clouded his gaze. You can leave. Don't tell anyone about what happened today. Javon, as if granted amnesty, hurried out. Only Xavier remained in the office. He reached for his coffee, but in his field of vision, he saw the tablet lying quietly on the desk. He picked it up and opened his email. Amid the mountain of crisis emails, there was a new one with a glaring subject line from an anonymous sender. The sender was a string of gibberish, and the subject contained only 2 words, the truth. He opened the email. There was no text, only an audio attachment and a video. He downloaded them and pressed play. A noisy background, sounding like a bar. Then came Daniela's voice, slurred with drunkenness and pride. That kid died so miserably. When he fell into the wax pool, he screamed like a pig being slaughtered. But it was worth it. Xavier, that stupid man, is so easy to fool. I said it wasn't on purpose, and he actually believed me. Another woman's voice. Daniela, aren't you afraid Madeline will take revenge? Daniela laughed. Revenge? She's nothing but a stray dog now. Besides, with Xavier protecting me, what can she do? That man looks shrewd, but he's blind and foolish at heart. I just have to act a little pitiful, and he'll believe anything. You're really something, Daniela. But about the wax museum, Are you sure the surveillance won't leave any evidence? I took care of it long ago. The only copy left is with Xavier, and since he loves me so much, how could he bear to use it as evidence? He probably deleted it already. The audio ended abruptly there. His trembling hand hovered over the video for a long time before he finally found the courage to click play. Ryan's desperate pleas on his knees, Daniela's venomous words, and that shocking accident. It was as if invisible hands were gripping his throat, the suffocating sensation making him feel the terror of impending death. So Madeline had been telling the truth when she said Daniela was torturing and killing Ryan. Xavier sat in front of the computer, his whole body cold. He remembered the day at the wax museum. The pang in his heart when he received Daniela's call. He remembered leaving Madeline, who was buried in the dirt. Without looking back. He remembered that he hadn't even confirmed Ryan's death himself, but simply believed the story that the wax pool wasn't that hot. It turned out that from beginning to end, he had been deceiving himself. He covered his face and broke down in tears. Honey, I was wrong. Please come back. After a long time. He wiped away his tears and asked his assistant to hire a private investigator to look into recent events. It took only an hour for the assistant to forward everything the private investigator had found to his inbox. Xavier had thought Daniela's crime was nothing more than the reckless killing at the wax museum, but when he opened the hundreds of pages of documents, his heart stopped instantly. One after another, each incident seemed to mock his blind indulgence and trust in her. His phone vibrated. It was a call from Daniela. On the screen, the name Daniela flashed, looking so ironic at this moment. Xavier stared at the name until the ringing stopped. Then he stood up, grabbed his coat and car keys. He was going to find Daniela and get answers. Daniela lived in the luxury apartment Xavier had bought for her, located in the most expensive riverside area of Houston. Xavier had the access card and key, but he had never come here alone late. At night, the elevator rose silently, the mirrored walls reflecting his pale face. He looked at the stranger in the reflection and recalled the first time he brought Daniela to see the apartment. Back then, she said, "Xavi, this place is too expensive. I can't afford to live here." He ruffled her hair and smiled. "Silly girl, what's mine is yours." How ridiculous. The elevator doors opened. The hallway was carpeted thickly, absorbing all footsteps. Xavier walked up to the door of 2806. He didn't ring the bell, but unlocked it directly with his key. Only a floor lamp was lit in the living room. Daniela, wearing a bathrobe, was sitting on the sofa shopping online. Beer cans and takeout boxes were scattered on the coffee table. When she saw Xavier come in, she froze for a moment, then put on her usual sweet smile. "Xavi, why are you here? You didn't even call ahead. The place is such a mess. Did you delete the surveillance footage from the wax museum?" Xavier asked directly, his voice frighteningly calm. Daniela's smile froze on her face. She put down her phone and stood up. "Xavier, what are you talking about? Wasn't that day just an accident?" You were the one who had the urn kicked over too, right?" Xavier stepped forward. "I've found out everything." The air froze for several seconds. Then the innocent expression on Daniela's face shattered and peeled away like a mask. She slowly straightened up, her usual fragile demeanor gone, replaced by a kind of almost lazy arrogance. "Oh, so you found out." She shrugged, walked to the liquor cabinet, and poured herself a glass of whiskey. "Took you longer than I expected." Seeing her like this, Xavier's stomach churned again. Why? Daniela sneered and turned around. "Of course, because it's fun. Watching the high-end, mighty Mr. Kenward get played like a fool by me, seeing Madeline, that golden girl, trampled into the mud. How entertaining." He took a sip of wine and continued, "As for Ryan, who told him to stand in my way? How could Madeline truly hate you? And how would you have poured all your to me? RD was like a poison blade, stabbing into Xavier's heart. He trembled uncontrollably. "So, from the very beginning, you were just using me? Using you. Daniela raised her eyebrows in an exaggerated manner. Don't make it sound so unpleasant. We're just getting what we each need. You need Daniela to fill that emptiness in your heart, and I need a stepping stone to climb higher fair trade, isn't it? She walked up to Xavier and reached out to touch his face, but he slapped her hand away harshly. Don't touch me. Xavier stared at her, finally seeing the true nature beneath her mask, greedy, vicious, and utterly without limits. You won't end well. He heard his own voice, cold as ICE.as if to deliver the final blow. Daniela raised her eyebrows again. Mr. Kenward, stop struggling. Your company is about to go bankrupt. Madeline doesn't want you anymore, and your parents. She paused deliberately, a meaningful smile on her lips. Oh right, you don't know yet, do you? Your parents came to see me 2 days ago, asking to work with me to drain the last of your family assets. Truly your own flesh and blood. Xavier's pupils contracted sharply. You don't believe it? Daniela took out her phone and played a recording. They're Ali Lopez. Ella, Xavier is immature, but we believe in you. As long as you agree to give us 30% afterwards, we'll give you the password to his safe and the spare seal. The recording continued, but Xavier could no longer hear it clearly. The world spun. A sharp ringing filled his ears. He gripped the back of the sofa just to barely stay upright. Daniela turned off the recording, her smile dazzling. I heard you're dying soon. If you're going to die, get lost and don't get in my way anymore. That last sentence was the final straw that broke the camel's back. Xavier lunged at her, hands gripping Daniela's throat. I'm going to kill you, but he was far too weak. Daniela easily broke free and shoved him hard in return. Xavier fell backward, his lower back slamming into the corner of the coffee table. A wave of pain instantly flooding his body. He collapsed to the floor, watching as Daniela straightened her robe, looking at him as if he were a clown, pathetic. She shook her head, her tone full of disdain. If you knew this would happen, why did you do what you did? If you had obediently been my cash machine, I wouldn't have gone this far. She forcibly pushed him out the door, her face mocking. This apartment is mine now. Get out. The door slammed shut with a bang. Xavier lay on the cold floor outside the door, tears finally streaming uncontrollably down his face. But he didn't make a sound, only wept in silence, letting despair flood over him like a tide. He didn't know how long had passed before he struggled to his feet and limped out of the apartment. As the elevator descended, he watched the floor numbers change and suddenly remembered that many years ago, Madeline had said to him, Xavier, no matter what happens, I'll always be by your back then. He had replied with a smile, I'm not a woman. I don't need your protection. Now, he finally understood the weight of those words, and at last, he understood what he had lost. Stepping out of the building, the night wind was bitterly cold. Xavier looked up at the window of 2806. The lights were still on. He took out his phone and dialed the police. I'd like to report that Daniela is suspected of attempted murder, commercial fraud, and extortion. I will provide the evidence. After hanging up, he deleted all photos, chat records, and contact information related to Daniela from his phone. Then, he blocked her everywhere. His finger accidentally tapped the photo album, and a picture popped up. It was the last photo he had taken with Madeline, but the timestamp was from 3 years ago. It seemed that ever since Daniela appeared, he hadn't taken any more photos with her. His album was filled with nothing but Daniela. Staring at that photo, his eyes blurred with tears, and at last, he broke down and sobbed his heart out. San Francisco Moscone Center. The main hall, with a capacity of 1,000 people, was packed to the brim, with the aisles and the back rows crowded with people standing. The air was filled with an almost feverish anticipation. Everyone knew that today they would witness history. Backstage in the lounge, Madeline checked her presentation one last time. She wore a dark gray business suit and skirt, her makeup subtle and elegant. The woman in the mirror had a slender face and calm eyes, the faded scar at her temple did not diminish her aura, but instead added a touch of weathered charm. "Are you nervous?" A man's voice came from behind her. Elijah Scott walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee, dressed in a perfectly tailored white suit. His steps steady and composed. He was the 3rd-generation heir of the Scott Group, and Madeline's most important overseas partner, completely different from the so-called rumored love interest. "A little." Madeline took the coffee, answering honestly, "You deserve all of this." Elijah smiled. 3 years ago, when you showed me that rough prototype in a Silicon Valley garage, I knew you would change the world." Madeline did not respond. She remembered that rainy night 3 years ago, standing on the streets of San Francisco with her suitcase, penniless, with only a laptop and a heart full of despair. It was Elijah who discovered her, or rather, discovered her talent. "It's time." A staff member knocked on the door to remind them. Madeline took a deep breath and finished her coffee in one gulp. When she walked onto the stage, the entire hall erupted in thunderous applause. "Good afternoon, everyone." The big screen lit up. The image split in 2. On the left was congested city traffic and accident-prone roads. On the right was a blank space. Her voice echoed through the hall, clear and steady. 3 years ago, I participated in the development of an intelligent driving system. It was supposed to make roads safer, but for various reasons, it became the source of disaster. Madeline's tone was calm, but those in the audience who knew her story could hear the undercurrents beneath that calmness. "Since then, I've been pondering one question. When technology betrays its original purpose, what should we do?" She clicked the remote, and lines of code began to appear in the blank space on the right. "The answer is to start over." For the next 45 minutes, Madeline presented the Asteroid S10 to the world. A brand new architecture, revolutionary algorithms, and unprecedented safety redundancy design. When the demonstration showed simulated vehicles driving smoothly even under extreme road conditions, the audience gasped in disbelief. The most astonishing part was the live demonstration. The big screen was connected to a live feed from a test site 60 kilometers away in the desert. 20 vehicles equipped with a S10 drive system completed a series of complex tests, including convoy formation, emergency obstacle avoidance, and extreme weather response, all without human control. 0 errors. When the demonstration ended, the entire audience stood and applauded, and the applause lasted a full 3 minutes. It was time for the media Q&A session. "Ms. Pinson, the $10 drive system and the Kenward Group's previously released S9 drive system share similarities in naming and some design concepts. Is there any connection between the two?" The question was sharp, but Madeline was well prepared. The $10 drive system is a completely independently developed new system, unrelated to any existing product. She paused, then added, "If there is any connection, it's that the existence of the $10 drive system proves that some mistakes can be corrected, and some wounds can be healed both in technology and in humanity." A low murmur rose from the audience. Everyone understood the underlying meaning. "How do you view the Kenward Group's current predicament? There are rumors that they are doing whatever it takes to get you back to save the company." Madeline was silent for a few seconds. Everyone must take responsibility for their own choices. Her voice was soft, but through the microphone, it reached every ear clearly. "What I can do is make sure the tragedy does not happen again." The Q&A session ended in a subtle atmosphere. As Madeline stepped off the stage, Elijah was waiting for her at the backstage entrance. "You answered very well," he said. Madeline shook her head. "Just the truth." "What's next?" "The celebration dinner is at 7, but if you're tired, I'd like to be alone for a while." Elijah nodded in understanding and patted her shoulder. "Go ahead. The car is waiting for you at the side door." The black sedan drove away from the convention center, merging into the night of San Francisco. Madeline sat in the back seat, gazing at the dazzling streets outside the window, feeling a sense of peace she had never known before. Her phone vibrated. It was a message from her assistant. "Ms. Pinson, Mr. Kenward has been waiting for you in the hotel lobby for 4 hours. Should I arrange for you to enter through another entrance?" Madeline stared at the message, her finger hovering over the screen for a long time. In the end, she replied, "No need. I'll go in through the main entrance. What must be faced, must be faced." One day ago, on the other side of the world, Houston, Methodist Neal Cancer Center, private patient room. Xavier leaned against the headboard. The live stream on his tablet had just ended. The screen froze on Madeline's back as she walked off the stage, composed, resolute, without a trace of nostalgia. He reached out, his fingertip lightly touching the figure on the screen, but just as he was about to make contact, he pulled back. Tears slid down silently. A nurse pushed the door open to change his dressing. Seeing the tear stains on his face, she gently advised, "Mr. Kenward, you mustn't get too emotional. It's not good for your health." "I know." Xavier wiped away his tears and forced a smile. "I just saw something worth being happy about." The nurse didn't quite understand, but still comforted him. "You need to stay positive. The cure rate for early-stage stomach cancer is very high. Once you're a bit better, we'll start chemotherapy." "I'm giving up on chemotherapy," Xavier interrupted. The nurse was stunned. "What?" "I said, I'm giving up on chemotherapy," Xavier repeated, his tone calm. "I'll have the surgery, but no chemo. I'd rather save the money and compensate the accident victims. But your condition I know the consequences." Xavier looked out the window. Night had already fallen. "But the debts I owe, I have to repay them." The nurse wanted to say more, but seeing the determination in Xavier's eyes, she finally just sighed, quietly finished changing his dressing, and left. Silence returned to the hospital room. Xavier picked up his phone and opened the ticket booking app. The earliest flight to San Francisco was at 10 o'clock the next morning. He clicked to purchase and entered his password. When the payment confirmation popped up, he suddenly remembered many years ago, when Madeline received her first project bonus and excitedly wanted to take him on a trip. "Back then," he said, "what's so fun in our own country? If we're going, let's go abroad." She smiled and agreed, then stayed up late taking freelance jobs, saving up for 3 months to book tickets to the Maldives. And then, an urgent matter came up at his company, and he canceled the trip. She didn't say anything, just quietly canceled the tickets and bore all the losses herself. At the time, he thought it was only natural, of course. Work was more important than leisure. Only now did he realize that what he missed was not just a trip. It was a heart that loved him without reservation. The phone slipped from his hand and fell onto the bed. Xavier curled up, burying his face in the pillow. This time, he didn't cry out loud. He just trembled silently, waiting for dawn. San Francisco was shrouded in morning mist. When Xavier walked out of the airport dragging his small suitcase, the cold wind made him cough uncontrollably. The pain in his stomach had become routine. He skillfully took out painkillers from his bag and swallowed them dry. He hailed a taxi and gave the hotel address. When Xavier entered the lobby, his inexpensive trench coat and haggard face stood in stark contrast to the bustling, luxurious surroundings. "Excuse me, is Miss Pinson here?" he asked at the front desk. The receptionist smiled politely. "Miss Pinson is indeed staying here, but she has instructed us not to receive visitors without an appointment." "I'm her." Xavier paused. The word wife stuck in his throat and finally became ex-wife. "I have something urgent to discuss with her." A flash of surprise crossed the receptionist's eyes, but her professionalism kept her smile flawless. "I'm sorry, we can't disclose guest information. You can try contacting Miss Pinson's assistant. I've already tried. She won't see me." There was a note of pleading in Xavier's voice. "Please, just tell her Xavier is waiting for her." "I'll wait as long as it takes." He had been waiting since dawn, going without sleep for over 10 hours, The discomfort in his body and the torment of jet lag made it almost impossible for him to stand, so he had to steady himself against the marble counter. The receptionist hesitated for a moment, but finally picked up the internal phone. 5 minutes later, an Asian man in a dark suit stepped out of the elevator. He was Madeline's assistant. Xavier had seen him in the live stream. "Mr. Kenward." The assistant's tone was polite but distant. "Ms. Pinson is in a meeting and probably won't have time to see you today." "I can wait," Xavier insisted. "I'm afraid waiting won't help." The assistant adjusted his glasses. "Miss Pinson made it clear she won't see you." And she paused. "She'll be flying to New York this afternoon for the next round of roadshows." Xavier's heart sank, but he refused to give up. "Then before she leaves, I just need 5 minutes, Mr. Kenward." A cold, clear voice came from behind him. Xavier's whole body trembled as he turned around abruptly. Madeline was standing not far away. She wore a casual dark knit sweater and a long skirt, holding a document in her hand, looking as if she was about to leave. She was thinner than he remembered, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. That quiet yet resilient aura instantly reminded him of the girl who used to work so intently in the lab years ago, Maddie. He called out her name almost instinctively, his voice choked with emotion. Madeline walked toward him, her steps steady and unhurried. She stopped in front of him, her gaze calmly sweeping over his pale face, ill-fitting trench coat, and slightly trembling hands. "Is there something you need?" she asked, her tone as if speaking to a stranger. Xavier opened his mouth. A thousand words stuck in his throat, but in the end, he could only squeeze out, The company needs you. Those accident victims, they need a solution. The open-source version of Asteroid S10 will be released next month." Madeline cut him off. "Any manufacturer can use it for free to repair and improve existing systems. That is all I can do. But the patents, the core technology those have nothing to do with the Kenward Group anymore." Madeline's voice was icy. "Mr. Kenward, I remember you said yourself that the company was yours and had nothing to do with me." That sentence was like a slap in the face, landing hard on Xavier. He remembered his arrogance and sense of entitlement when he said those words, and the flash of pain in Madeline's eyes at the time. "I was wrong." He lowered his head, his eyes brimming with tears. "Maddie, I know I was wrong. I shouldn't have trusted Daniela, shouldn't have doubted you, shouldn't have treated Ryan that way." At the mention of Ryan, Madeline's expression finally changed, but the change was not softness, but a deeper coldness. "Don't mention Ryan." Her voice dropped, but became even more intimidating. "You are not worthy of saying his name." Xavier's tears finally fell. "I'm sorry. I truly know I was wrong. Please, give me a chance to make it up to you. Make it up." Madeline laughed, but the smile never reached her eyes. "With what will you make it up? Money? Mr. Kenward, how much do you even have left? Or perhaps, with your..." Her gaze swept over the hand he pressed to his stomach. "Your life that's almost at its end." Xavier's face turned deathly pale. She even knew he had cancer. Xavier." Madeline stepped closer, so near that he could smell the crisp scent of orchid on her, a fragrance unfamiliar to him. The fresh grass perfume he once gave her, that faint grassy scent, was now long gone. "Listen carefully. I don't hate you. Hating someone takes too much energy, and you are not worth it." Her voice was soft, but every word cut deep. "I simply don't care anymore. Whether you live or die, are rich or destitute, it has nothing to do with me. Now, please leave." At that moment, the elevator doors opened again. Elijah stepped out. Today, he wore a black turtleneck sweater, his eyes clear behind gold-rimmed glasses, his whole presence exuding a calm and unhurried masculine charm. Seeing the scene in the lobby, he raised his eyebrows slightly, then naturally walked to Madeline's side. "Maddie, the car is ready." "As I thought, orchid suits you better." His tone was intimate and familiar. He then turned to Xavier. offering a professional smile. And this is Mr. Kenward? I've heard a lot about you. Xavier watched as Elijah naturally brushed the stray hair from Madeline's forehead, saw the unspoken understanding between them, and the pain in his stomach suddenly intensified, nearly making him collapse. Me said with difficulty. Leja. Smile did not change. I heard the Kenward group has been facing some difficulties lately. That's unfortunate. However, the Scott group is considering entering the autonomous driving sector. If Mr. Kenward is interested in selling company assets, we can discuss an acquisition. Acquisition. That word was like a final verdict, announcing Xavier's complete defeat. He looked at Madeline. She showed no reaction, tacitly agreeing with Elijah's words. So, in her heart, he was no longer even considered an opponent. Just an acquisition target, a problem to be dealt with. Xavier wanted to say something, but found he had nothing left to say. Madeline glanced at her watch. We should go. Mr. Kenward, suit yourself. On the plane back to Houston, Xavier threw up 3 times. The flight attendant asked with concern if he needed any help, but he just shook his head, rinsed his mouth with ice water, and continued to drift in and out of sleep. The painkillers were wearing off, and the pain in his stomach felt like a hand twisting inside him, each breath bringing a sharp stab. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the desolation in his heart. The plane landed at 3 a.m. Houston time. Xavier had no luggage. He had left his small suitcase in the lobby of the Fairmont San Francisco and couldn't be bothered to go back for it. He walked out of the airport alone, hailed a taxi, and gave the driver his parents' address. He needed to ask them face to face. Why? Why would even my own parents betray me? The car drove through the silent streets, the streetlights casting dim halos. Looking out at the familiar scenery, Xavier remembered years ago, his father holding his hand as they walked down the street, promising to buy him lots and lots of toys. His mother busy in the kitchen, the aroma filling the whole house. Were all those moments of warmth just an illusion, or is it that, in the face of profit, even blood ties means so little? The car stopped at the entrance of the old apartment complex. This was the Kenward family's old house. After Xavier became successful, he had offered many times to buy his parents a bigger place, but they always said they were used to living here and couldn't bear to leave the neighbors. Now, thinking back, maybe they just didn't want him to know that they had already mortgaged the place, cashing in on his filial piety. The elevator was broken, so Xavier had to take the stairs 0.6 floors. It took him a full 20 minutes, stopping to rest 3 times, each breath tinged with the taste of blood. When he finally stood at the door, he found it was ajar. He pushed the door open, and the scene before him left him frozen in place. The living room was a complete mess. The furniture was gone. The family portrait that had hung on the wall was torn to pieces and thrown on the floor. Even the curtains had been ripped down. There were drag marks on the floor, and dust danced in the dim light. This didn't look like moving out. It looked like fleeing. Dad? Mom? Xavier's voice echoed in the empty room, but no one answered. He walked into the master bedroom. The wardrobe doors were wide open, and inside was completely empty. The cosmetics on the dressing table were gone. The nightstand drawer was pulled open. And there was nothing inside. Only a note was stuck to the headboard, written in his mother's handwriting. Xavi, Dad and Mom are sorry, but we're old and need security. We've taken the money. Don't look for us. Take good care of yourself. Next to the note lay a property certificate and a notarized document. The house had been transferred to his father's name half a year ago, and he had signed as the donor. Xavier remembered that day when his father brought him a stack of documents to sign, saying they were procedures related to retirement insurance. He hadn't even looked before signing because they were the parents he trusted most. So trust, it turns out, is meant to be betrayed. The burly woman squatted down and patted her face. Today was just an appetizer. From now on, we'll make sure to take care of you every day. Daniela curled up. shivering uncontrollably. This was only the beginning. In the days that followed, she became the public property of the entire cell block. During the day, she was ordered to do the dirtiest, most exhausting chores. At night, she was dragged off to serve different people. Any resistance only brought more brutal torment, and begging for mercy only excited her abusers further. A month later, her face was scalded with boiling water, leaving a permanent scar. 2 months later, her right hand was stomped and broken. After a crude treatment by the prison doctor, her fingers could never straighten again. 3 months later, she accidentally fell down the stairs during labor, breaking her left leg. Every accident left her alive, but wishing she were dead. Daniela knew who had arranged it all. In the visitation room, Xavier's compassionate gaze and his words, "They'll take good care of you," were not a threat, but a warning. He was creating a tailor-made hell for her in his own way. And she didn't even have the right to die. Every time she tried to commit suicide, she was timely discovered, revived, and then subjected to even crueler punishment. "Wanna die?" The burly woman pressed her face into the ground. "Mr. Kenward said you have to stay alive. Alive to suffer." Mr. Kenward. Daniela lay on the cold concrete floor, staring at the dim yellow light on the ceiling, and suddenly burst into hysterical laughter. As she laughed, tears mixed with blood slid down her face. She finally understood. Shortly after, the internet was set ablaze by a sensational piece of news. At exactly 10 in the morning, an anonymous account simultaneously posted a 47-minute video on multiple domestic and international social media platforms. The video had a simple title: "The Truth of the Wax Museum." The opening was a scene Xavier knew all too well: an abandoned wax museum, a rusty crane, and Ryan suspended in midair. But this time, the angle was different. It was a complete recording from another surveillance camera hidden in the corner. In the footage, Daniela walked up to the control panel, glancing around. After making sure no one was there, her usual look of weakness vanished, replaced by an almost cruel excitement. Doubt not to accidentally knock over the lever. He pushed it down forcefully and without hesitation. Rope slid down rapidly, and Ryan's scream was heart-wrenching. Daniela watched as the girl fell into the wax pool, and a smile even curled at the corner of her lips. She even leaned over, watching the struggling figure in the wax pool gradually stop moving before turning to leave. The video did not end there. The second segment showed 10 minutes after the incident. Daniela met a man wearing a hat in an alley outside the wax museum. "Is everything cleaned up?" the man asked. "The surveillance footage has been deleted. Only the copy in Xavier's hands remains. He can't bear to use it as evidence." She wanted to say something more, but Xavier had already turned and left, never looking back. Visitation time ended, and Daniela was escorted back to her cell block. As she passed through the recreation area, several female inmates eyed her maliciously, exchanging glances. "The new girl has such soft, delicate skin." A burly woman with a face full of scars licked her lips. Daniela lowered her head and quickened her pace. But what was meant to come would come. That night in the showers, while Daniela was washing, someone suddenly covered her mouth from behind and dragged her into a stall. 3 people, all violent offenders from her cell block, their eyes fierce. "Heard you used to be a rich family's princess?" The burly woman gripped her chin. "You really do look nice." "Let me go." Daniela struggled, but the difference in strength was overwhelming. "Let you go." Another inmate laughed. "In here, you follow our rules. And the rule is if you're good looking, you serve us." Daniela's eyes widened in terror. "No, please, no." Her resistance only brought more punches and kicks. The agony of broken ribs, the taste of blood in her mouth, and those filthy hands roaming her body. A dash. Her screams were drowned out by the sound of running water. When it was over, Daniela was tossed onto the damp floor like a rag. Bruises covered her body. A certain part throbbed with tearing pain. and her mouth was full of blood. He slowly crouched down and picked up the torn family photo from the floor. In the photo, his 10-year-old self smiled innocently, his parents holding him on either side, looking like such a happy family. It was all fake. Tears fell onto the photo, blurring those false smiles. At that moment, his phone rang. It was a call from the bank. "Mr. Kenward, 3 of your loans are overdue. According to the contract, our bank will apply to freeze all your accounts and initiate asset disposal procedures. Please come to the branch within 24 hours, or we will take legal action." Xavier hung up, and another message came in. It was a notice from the property management. The maintenance fees for his apartment had been overdue for 3 months. Xavier was not a fool. Once, he had given her all his tenderness, and she had personally forced him to become like this. "Xavier," she murmured into the void, "I was wrong. I really was wrong. Please, just let me die." No one answered. Daniela's voice was clear and distinct. "That idiot, and he's supposed to be a CEO. He's unbelievably stupid." The man laughed. "Daniela, you're impressive. But that kid died so miserably. Her screams will haunt my nightmares." Nightmares. Daniela lit a cigarette. "Think about the money we can get. Any nightmare is worth it." The third segment was footage from a convenience store's surveillance camera. It clearly recorded Daniela purchasing mango powder, and the timestamp matched exactly with the day Madeline was forced to ingest the allergy medicine. Finally, there was a screenshot of a chat log. The conversation between Daniela and her accomplice. They meticulously planned how to frame Madeline, how to gain Xavier's trust, and how to gradually drain the Kenward group. One line in the chat was highlighted in red: "That self-righteous Xavier. As long as I act pitiful, he'll believe anything. Once he's no longer useful, I'll kick him aside." 10 minutes after the video was posted, the number of shares surpassed 1 million. An hour later, Daniela intentional homicide shot to the top of the trending topics, followed by the word explosive. 2 hours later, the Houston Police Department issued a statement. Criminal coercive measures had been taken against the suspect Daniela in accordance with the law, and the case was under further investigation. The entire internet was in an uproar. Media outlets that once praised Daniela as a genius girl and a role model began digging into her dark past: academic fraud, school bullying during high school, and even records of theft as a minor, and all the comments that once accused Madeline of envying the talented and suppressing juniors were dug up and harshly criticized. Countless people flooded Madeline's social media accounts to apologize, even though she hadn't updated them in half a year. Xavier's phone was bombarded with calls. Madeline picked up her daughter and kissed her cheek. "Kelsey, do you like it?" "I love it." Kelsey hugged her neck. "Mommy, why is this place called Ryan?" The question brought an instant hush to those around them. Many who knew the story exchanged glances, waiting for Madeline's answer. Madeline was silent for a few seconds, then softly said, "To remember an angel." She did not explain further, but carried her daughter into the gallery. Elijah walked beside her, naturally holding her hand. The 3 of them, under the gaze of the crowd, walked into that world filled with starlight. The interior of the gallery was designed like a dream. Beneath the glass floor tiles flowed projections of starlight. Children's artworks hung on the walls, and in the central hall stood a white grand piano that anyone could play at will. Kelsey ran to the piano and clumsily pressed a few keys. "Mommy, this sound is so beautiful." Madeline walked over and sat beside her daughter. "Let me teach you a song, okay?" "Okay." Madeline took her daughter's small hand and guided her to press a series of simple notes. It was Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, the first piano piece Ryan had learned. The crisp notes echoed through the spacious hall. Elijah stood to the side, watching his wife and daughter, his eyes full of tenderness. He knew that there would always be a corner of Madeline's heart that belonged to Ryan and to that scarred past, but he did not mind. because it was those experiences that shaped the resilient and gentle woman she was now, and they had also given him the chance to enter her life. Will you apologize for covering up for the murderer? Xavier said nothing. He simply nodded to the police. I'll go with you. As he walked out the door, an egg suddenly flew from the crowd and smashed against his shoulder. Egg yolk and white slid down his shirt, sticky and disgusting. Accomplice to murder, someone shouted. Go to hell. More insults and debris flew toward him. The police shielded him as they hurried to the patrol car, but the voices still pierced his ears. Ruined your wife's brother for a bitch, how despicable. Serves you right to go bankrupt. Serves you right to get cancer. How does a man like that still have the nerve to live? The car door closed, shutting out the chaos outside. Xavier sat in the back seat, looking at his own disheveled reflection in the window and bitter smile. There was no name on the gravestone. Madeline stood there for a long time. In the end, she divided the white chrysanthemums she had brought, placing half in front of the neighboring grave. The wind rose, stirring the petals of the white chrysanthemums. Sunlight filtered through the gaps in the leaves, casting dappled shadows. Not long ago, someone told her the news that Xavier had passed away years before. At the time, she was in a meeting. After hanging up the phone, she continued and finished 2 more hours of negotiations. She could barely remember the name anymore. That night, after returning home, she sat alone in her study, gazing out the window until dawn. Did she hate him? She had once hated him, but time had washed everything away. The hatred faded, and the pain dulled. What remained was only a faint sense of melancholy and a barely noticeable sense of release. Release, because he was finally free. Release, because all grudges had ended with death. Ryan, I've come to see you. She spoke softly. Ryan's Star Studio opened today. Many children love it. Are you happy? The wind brushed past, as if in reply. She looked again at the nameless gravestone beside her. There was no greeting, no words. She simply stood there quietly for a while. Then she turned and left. Houston City Central Jail, maximum security inmate section. Daniela curled up in the corner of her cell, trembling all over. After 3 months inside, she had become emaciated, her eye sockets sunken. Cheekbones jutting out. There was no trace left of the delicate girl she once was. 0778, come out. The prison guard banged on the iron door. Daniela looked up in terror. Where are we going? Visitation. Someone wants to see you. Visitation? Who would come to see her? Her parents had publicly severed ties with her after she was imprisoned. Her so-called friends had all vanished, and Xavier, that foolish man, could barely protect himself now. Who could it be? With confusion and a faint glimmer of hope, Daniela was escorted to the visitation room. The person sitting on the other side of the glass left her stunned. It was Xavier. He was even thinner than the last time they met, his face as pale as paper, but his eyes were calm, even carrying a trace of compassion. Xavier. Daniela blurted out his name instinctively, pressing her hand to the glass. You're here to save me, aren't you? I know I was wrong. I really know I was wrong. Xavier watched her performance in silence, saying nothing. That video was faked. Someone set me up. It must have been that bitch Madeline. Daniela grew more agitated. Xavier, you have to believe me. I'm innocent. You're so capable. You must have a way to get me out. Daniela. Xavier finally spoke, his voice soft, but it silenced her instantly. He looked at the twisted face across the glass and suddenly felt she was a stranger. Was this the person he once risked everything to protect? Was this the one for whom he had hurt everyone who truly loved him? How ridiculous. I've watched the full surveillance footage from the Wax Museum, Xavier said. Your movement pushing the lever is perfectly clear. Daniela's face turned deathly pale in an instant. And there's your record of buying mango powder and chat screenshots with your accomplice. Xavier continued, the evidence is conclusive. What else do you have to argue? Daniela's expression shifted from panic to venom. So you came to laugh at me? Xavier, don't forget, you're an accomplice too. If you hadn't covered for me, how could I have stayed free for so long? You're right. Xavier nodded, so I will be punished as well. But your punishment is only just beginning. He stood up, ready to leave. Wait. Daniela pounded on the glass. Xavier, you can't do this to me. I love you so much. Everything I did was to be with you, love. Xavier turned back, a mocking smile curling at his lips. Daniela, the only person you've ever loved is yourself. And I was just the ladder you used to climb higher. He paused, then said softly, but it doesn't matter. In prison, there are plenty of people who love you. They'll take good care of you. The chill in his words made Daniela's whole body go cold. In early autumn, Houston's sky was high and the clouds were light. Today, the Ryan Star Studio in the southern part of the city was especially lively. This was a special children's art gallery, built with funding from the Ryan Foundation and open all children free of charge. The name of the gallery came from Ryan's favorite saying during his lifetime: "Every child is a star that has fallen to earth." At the opening ceremony, Madeline, as the chairwoman of the Ryan Foundation, gave a speech. She stood on the stage, more composed and poised than she had been 5 years ago. Her off-white suit made her look capable. Her gaze was gentle yet firm, and the scar at her temple had faded to the point of being almost invisible. 5 years ago, I lost my brother. Her voice, carried through the speakers across the venue, was calm with a barely perceptible tenderness. But his dream did not disappear. He hoped that every child could experience art, that every child could have a childhood illuminated by light. Today, that dream has come true. Thunderous applause erupted from the audience. Among the guests were government officials, entrepreneurs, artists, and many ordinary families who had brought their children. Madeline's gaze swept over the crowd and paused in one corner. Standing there were Elijah and their 4-year-old daughter, Kelsey Scott. The little girl wore a pink dress and had 2 small braids, excitedly pointing at the star-shaped decorations inside the gallery. Her expression softened. After the speech, Madeline stepped off the stage, and Kelsey immediately ran over. "Mommy, that star can light up." Reporters, investors, and even curious strangers all wanted to get a first-hand response from him. He turned off his phone, unplugged the landline, and only then did the world quiet down. He sat in a small rented apartment paid for with his last bit of cash, enough for just 1 month. The room had only a bed, a chair, a simple wardrobe, and stains left on the wall by the previous tenant. On the computer screen, the video played on a loop. Every time he saw the scene of Daniela pushing down the lever, his stomach twisted. Every time he heard the words, "That idiot Xavier," he couldn't stop himself from trembling. Oh, this was the truth, so naked and cruel. Oh, he really was a complete fool. The sound of police sirens came from outside, growing closer. Xavier walked to the window and saw several police cars parked downstairs, with reporters crowding around, their cameras aimed at the entrance. They had arrived. He knew they would come. Xavier did not hide. He put on a clean shirt and combed his hair meticulously. That was his last bit of dignity. There was a knock at the door. He took a deep breath and walked over to open it. Outside stood 2 police officers and a crowd of reporters. Squeezed into the hallway, Mr. Kenward, the leading officer, showed his badge. Regarding the case of Daniela's suspected intentional homicide and commercial fraud, we need your cooperation in the investigation. Please come with us. Flashbulbs went off wildly, and questions surged like a tide. Mr. Kenward, what is your response to the video's content? Did you already know Daniela's true nature? Elijah. Madeline suddenly called him. Elijah walked over. What is it? Thank you. Madeline looked at him, her gaze sincere. Thank you for being with me all these years. Elijah smiled and took her hand. Silly, we're husband and wife. Kelsey looked up at her dad, then at her mom, and suddenly said, Mommy, Daddy, can we always be together? Madeline and Elijah exchanged a smile. Yes, they answered at the same time. After the ceremony, Madeline saw her wife and daughter to the car take Kelsey home first. "I need to go back to the office for a bit," she said to Elijah. "Don't be too late." Elijah kissed her forehead. "Kelsey said she wants you to tell her a story tonight." "I promise." Watching the car drive away, Madeline did not return to the office immediately. She asked the driver to take her to the cemetery in the west of the city. It had been 5 years, and she came here once every year. On Ryan's birthday. Today was not any special day, but she just wanted to come and take a look. The cemetery was very quiet. Beside Ryan's tombstone, there was a new gravestone that had appeared at some point. It seemed grass to have been neglected for a long time, overgrown with wild. She turned and walked toward the revolving door side by side with Elijah. Elijah looked back at Xavier, his gaze filled with pity and assessment, but not a trace of hostility. For Xavier was no threat at all. The revolving door turned, and the two figures disappeared into the morning light of San Francisco. Xavier stood where he was, unmoving for a long time. The receptionist asked cautiously, "Do you need any help, sir?" Xavier shook his head, dragging his suitcase, and walked step by step toward the exit. When he stepped out of the hotel, the sunlight was blinding. He squinted, looking at the bustling crowd on the street, and suddenly remembered something Madeline once said. "Xavi, no matter how far I go, I will always remember the way home." Back then, he laughed at her for being sentimental. Now he finally understood that some roads, once taken, can never be retraced. His phone vibrated. It was a long-distance call from his lawyer back home, Mr. Kenward. "The matter of your parents transferring assets has been clarified. They used your name as guarantor and took out loans totaling $16 million from 3 banks. They have now left the country and their whereabouts are unknown. The banks require you to repay within a week, or they will apply to freeze all your remaining assets." Xavier hung up the phone and looked up at the sky. The sky over San Francisco was a piercing blue. Suddenly, he began to laugh, tears streaming down his face. His family was ruined. He was abandoned by all and terminally ill. "Xavier, oh Xavier, this is the ending you brought upon yourself." As she walked out of the cemetery, her phone rang. It was a photo from Elijah. Kelsey was dancing in the living room, smiling like a little son. The caption read, "Kelsey says she misses mommy. Come home soon." Madeline smiled and replied, "I'll be home soon." Sitting in the car, she took one last look in the direction of the cemetery. The setting sun dyed the sky a warm orange red. All the past pains, the irreparable mistakes, the people she had loved and hated, all were left behind in that twilight. And she was going home, back to a home filled with light, laughter, and waiting. The car started and drove toward the bustling city. Night deepened, and snowflakes began to fall. The first snow of this long winter in the rearview mirror. The cemetery grew more distant, eventually disappearing from sight, just like those memories, which would, in the end, be gently buried by time. The end.